Hello, Becky Excell. I am really delighted to meet you. And you're a gluten-free chef, author, influencer, and really, I'm very interested in that. But also, I think from the Therapy Works perspective, I think what's so powerful is you've used your own personal experiences of eating disorders and having a mastectomy to raise awareness and raise the sort of psychological aspects of these, so in order to help others.
I feel like it's been amazing that I've had this platform that I've built up over the years that's now into the millions of people that are all, it's crazy that they're all people who follow a gluten-free diet or are friends and family of people who follow a gluten-free diet, but they're just regular people. And I felt it to be really important every time I've come across like a struggle in my life or something else that's beyond just gluten-free, to be able to sort of talk about it. And it's helped me personally to be able to speak openly to an audience of so many people, because obviously you get a lot of info back and you get people who say, oh yeah, me too, and everything. But also it's just felt so nice to be able to do that and raise that awareness, because with both of the sort of major things I would say that I've experienced, being anorexia and having my BRCA2 gene mutation, they were things that I didn't really know much about prior to having them, especially with the BRCA2. So it was really something that I felt really passionate about talking about and making sure that everyone knew about it, and not having that fear to voice it, even though that's not what people necessarily follow me for.
I really want to get into that, both those things, your eating disorder and your mastectomy. Before I get into that, do you have an understanding of what it is about you that has meant that you have millions of followers? Because that it has a big, one's relationship with one's online social media does influence how we see ourselves. And I wonder what sense you make of it for yourself.
I've always found it very weird, and I don't really completely get it. The best way that I would think about it is that I think I'm just incredibly normal and down to earth, and people can relate to me because I am that. And that was when I was growing up. I think that was to my detriment, that I've always said I can only be me. I can't be anyone else. I can't try and be anyone else. And when I was a kid, when you're a
Thank
teenager,
God.
yeah, but when you're a teenager, you notice like there are so many people who sort of try, just because of how you're growing up, they try and be someone that they're not. They want to fit in with certain crowds. And I really struggled with that. And that was something that massively impacted sort of my friendships when I was younger. And I thought that was a real negative. But now looking at it today, I think that the fact that I am just being me, truly me, this regular girl who I just live in a regular house. I have a sort of regular life, and it's not like I've got all fancy things. I'm just like the person here and the person there, and all my audience sort of relate to that. And I think that's kind of why people have continued to follow me. And the fact that I'm very, very open with that, and I'm very much part of my audience, and I'm that person who wants to talk to everyone. I run everything still 100% by myself. When people message me,
Wow.
I am the one who always replies. It's very hard work and it takes up a lot of hours. I'm working till really late at night every single night, making sure I respond to people.
Gosh.
I couldn't allow anyone else to do that, because people are asking me questions. People will speak very openly and personally to me, and I feel like they've allowed me to get to where I am. So I want to respect that, and I want to always speak back to them as me. So I think that sort of thing of me just being truly me, being a real human being, and always being there for people, and just trying to be that sort of shoulder that they can sort of just grip to and speak to all the time is kind of really helps. And I know that not everyone is able to do that within my space, and some people go down different routes, but for me, I found it's really, really important that I am always there for people.
It's interesting that you use the word just an ordinary person, just doing an ordinary thing, just like I saw the video of you going shopping. And it doesn't sound ordinary, because it sounds that in being the genuine you, the real you, that you kind of open yourself and your heart and your being and your thinking and build a relationship with people. It's a virtual relationship, but it also feels like a genuine relationship. And then you have a kind of sense of responsibility to them, that you kind of feel like, if you're giving me a platform that enables me to sell my books or my air fryer or doing the work that I do, I then have to reciprocate. And so that it's...
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And it's something that's quite overwhelming sometimes. And I do feel this sense of responsibility. And I feel like almost like there's a lot of weight on my shoulders to keep doing it. And I feel like if I ever wanted to step back...
It's quite an emotional load, isn't it? It's a big emotional load.
It was never designed or never something that I thought would get like this, because ultimately I started this about 10, 11 years ago, and it was just a hobby. It was just something that I was doing. I was just writing a few recipes, and I was doing it firstly because I was frustrated that there was nothing I could eat because I'd been told I had to go gluten-free. And then second, I was doing it just to enjoy it, and then people started tagging along, but it was just for fun. It was just something I did on the side, and it just grew to be something. So I think when people start doing what I'm doing nowadays, often they're doing it with the intention maybe of it being a job or a career, because they can see that that's a thing these days. Whereas when I started, no one was doing this as a job. So it was all just as a hobby. And I think that sort of made it difficult, but it's also...
I think the intention with which one starts and does things has a big influence on how it unfolds, isn't it?
Yeah, I think...
Because your intention was sort of spontaneous. It was
exactly.
Like, I'm having a problem with this. Maybe you are. Let me tell you what I'm doing.
Yeah,
tell me what you need.
It was a real passion, and it came from the heart, and it still does. And I don't think that will ever go. And that's why, however much I definitely struggle at times with the amount that I have to do and everything, I don't think I'll ever stop, just because I really feel passionate about helping everyone and making sure that no one is struggling, no one's missing out. And I feel like I'm the person who they respect and sort of trust, and I want to keep that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want anyone to miss out. That's a big goal to reach, isn't it? I think the question I ask all my guests is, I don't know whether it is, what's a particular challenge you are facing or have faced? And I'm wondering, of all the challenges you faced, which is the one that is kind of the most difficult for you right now?
I would say the biggest challenge, though, that I have ever faced in my life would 100%, without a doubt, be my eating disorder. So my eating disorder, it puts everything else into perspective, like literally, which is a good thing about it if you think of it in any sort of, try and think about it in a positive way, which, reflecting back on now, my eating disorder started... I mean, I was diagnosed in about 2013, but obviously it didn't start in 2013. It was probably, I would say, 2009, 20...
So tell me, what was it? How old were you, and what was so difficult about it?
I was about 18, 19, and I was sort of at the very start of university.
So you weren't a young adolescent.
No, people often ask me things about this and ask me about how the reasons why it came about, or did I have issues when I was a child? And as a kid, I just really enjoyed food. I didn't love food. It was like almost like I had nothing. It was just like, food is something that you eat. Oh, it's dinner time. Mum's made dinner. It was just a very normal sort of thing. But then when I went to university, I really struggled at university. I mean, I flipped between 3 universities. I dropped out, restarted, dropped out, 3, restarted.
Gosh.
And that was, a lot of that was to do with just feeling super isolated. I didn't make friends for some reason. I really, really struggled. And I think when you see everyone around you just enjoying themselves, and there's this thing of what university's meant to be like, and my experience wasn't that at all. Yeah. I sort of said to myself, right,
partying.
Yeah, I said, if I'm not going to be able to have that experience, I want to get into the best shape of my life. And that was my aim. I said, right, I'm gonna do it. However that, I'm gonna do it. So I started going to the gym a lot more. I started thinking, I'm not gonna eat. I'm on my own. No one's watching me. So I didn't eat very much. And then, because you don't eat very much, you start thinking about food like it all the time. And then it would go into this awful, unbelievable cycle of starving, binging, over exercising. And it was something that I just could not get out of. And it
hooked you.
It was, and once it starts, it just, I don't know, I kept changing the goalposts. I had this thing of like, I want to be this particular weight, or I want to be like this, I want to look like this. And then you get to that, and instead of just being like, yeah, I've done it, it'd be like, oh no, okay. You wouldn't even be happy with that. You'd just be like, right, let's see the next step. Let's see the next step. And I think with that, like, you start to lose your sense of self. And when you're not fueling your body, your brain's not functioning either. So
your brain isn't fed enough. Your brain doesn't work properly.
Yeah. So as it went along, I just struggled and struggled, and it just got worse and worse and worse. And honestly, it's fine. I always think it was me who got myself into that. I don't know how. And this is one of the things I always say is, like, people who have said to me, childhood trauma, or were you struggling with this, you struggling with that? And it was none of those things. And it's never been something that I've ever been able to work out why I felt the way I did and why it started particularly. I think there was just a whole host of different things. And I think often that is the case, that there's multiple factors that create an issue or create a positive thing. And that's kind of how it was for me.
I mean, the image that comes up for me, and maybe this doesn't fit, is that developmentally you had left home for the first time and you couldn't find a home within yourself. So you didn't have a team of friends that felt like home. So you had no internal sense of safety or control. So you used your mind to write, okay, I'm going to make a positive out of this. I'm going to get myself in the best shape. So just kind of, given I feel so awful and probably scared and also rejected. I feel very rejected because I haven't got friends. I see other people going clubbing or drinking or making friends. So I'm going to make myself as attractive as possible. I'm going to make myself in the best shape. So I'll stand out, and then kind of maybe unconsciously, maybe I'll get the friends and attract the friendship I want. And then it's like it's this awful dark force in a way that took a hold of you, and it ran you rather than you running it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. I think it gets to that point where, I mean, I don't ever remember it really starting, and I don't ever remember it taking proper control, but I just know that the hardest thing about it was that I was completely out of control. And you so often hear with people talk about eating disorders that there's like a little person on your shoulder who's telling you what's doing it. And for people who haven't been through it or don't fully understand it, they just think it's crazy. And
tell the person to shut up.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not that easy. And that's what made it harder as well. I mean, I was speaking to my boyfriend earlier, and I asked him, when did you first realise that I had an issue? Because he's been with me through this entire period, and we're still together.
So you had a boyfriend when you were at uni?
Yeah. So I'd met Mark in 2009, just prior to starting uni. And obviously I was up in Manchester at university. He was down in Essex, where we live. So it was quite a long distance sort of thing at the time, and we didn't get to see each other very often. But I asked him, when did you sort of notice that I probably had an eating disorder? There's loads of examples and stuff that he gave of like weird behaviours and stuff that I was sort of doing, or holidays that we'd supposed to be going on a nice holiday, and it just ended up with me getting really stressed when we went out for a meal, or me just saying, no, I don't want to do this, don't want to do that and stuff. But he just thought I was just being a bit strange, and I was just being a bit weird, and it was just like, maybe that's just how she is. And I was saying, why the hell did you stay with me if that's what you thought? But for some reason he did.
He must have loved you enough.
Yeah. But he said he didn't really, until about 2013, when I finally sort of asked for help, he didn't put two and two together, because I don't think people often do. And it was the same with my parents and stuff. They tried to help enormously, but if at the time when they were trying to help, I would just have told you that they were just being the most horrible people in the world. They were just being nasty and telling me to do things and accusing me of this and doing that. And that's just how an eating disorder makes you feel. It takes so much away from you and sort of destroys complete relationships with people. And I'm very fortunate that I still have a good relationship with them now, considering what we went through during that phase of my life, where I was just like, I think of myself, I was a horrible, horrible person. I was not a nice person, and they were just trying their best, but they couldn't do anything right in my eyes. It's really sad to think about it like that, really.
It's really like you lost yourself, like you lost your connection to your humanity and your being and your love and compassion, and you became a kind of like almost like a picture of a robot, like a sort of malevolent force, like on Star Wars, like the bad guy, where you're kind of beaming, you're extinguishing everybody around you because it's such a strong force. So how on earth did you unhook yourself?
It was difficult. So in 2013, as I said, I went and spoke to my doctor, and I said that I was struggling, and I realised how serious it was a little bit to myself then, because for the first time ever I burst into tears whilst I was talking to my GP. I just I couldn't get my words out, and I found it really hard. But I then I got some counselling and stuff like that, which, to be honest, a lot of the stuff that I always recommend, obviously, that people, as soon as they feel ready to, or if anyone can help them, that people seek help. But saying that, also, a lot of the help that I received, it didn't help me necessarily. And maybe it was just that I didn't want the help at the time. But the counselling, I sort of just left after a while. I just stopped going to it because I didn't want to. And then I actually went into like a day unit, an eating disorder day unit, for a little bit. And
were you very underweight? Were you?
I was very underweight. Yeah, I was really, really, really poorly. But this day unit was a place where, I don't know, there was 8 or 9 of us girls, and we were all there, all in the same position somewhat. But someone with an eating disorder, we were all the same. You sort of have these sort of traits, I guess. Your traits are like to be a perfectionist, and comparison and stuff like that. And I just felt like it was, for me personally, it was a horrible place to be. It made me worse. It spiraled me. I was watching the others.
I've heard that before.
Yeah, we were all watching each other.
You become competitive, how you can not do what you're meant to do, and how you can still maintain your eating disorder, or they look like you're getting better, all that
you sort of learn from each other. You learn traits from everyone else. Yeah, you do. Stuff that I'd never thought of before. I was suddenly finding this stuff out. So, and you're looking at everyone else and you're thinking everyone else there is better than you, and by better than you, I mean they're more underweight than you, they're more ill, they're more poorly, and you're like, I'm not as good as them. So you just try, and and it wasn't a good place for me. So I left that after a while. I just refused to go back, because sometimes you have those parts of time where you feel a bit more rational and you sort of think about things. You're like, no, I want to get better. There's this whole thing of wanting to get better and then just going away and wanting to get better. So at a point where I was feeling a bit better, I stopped going there. But it didn't help me stopping going there. What did help me, I think, was my dad got me to see a private psychotherapist lady, and she was very blunt with me. At this unit, they were very soft and very nice, and I think everyone has different ways of needing to be spoken to and approached.
Responding.
And they were just too soft and too lovely and trying to be sweet about it. And actually, I needed someone I needed someone to tell me,
you're killing yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
You're killing yourself.
And even, I always say this, like, even though at times people did tell me you're killing yourself, and you sort of just, it's ridiculous how you sort of just put it under the rug and don't really, and sort of just get on with it and keep going. You think,
denial is so powerful.
But this woman eventually sort of, she got through to me, and she got through to me from saying stuff about how I was also not just damaging myself, but damaging my family. Like I wasn't just not being nice to them, but when I would always pretend that I was being really lovely, and I would cook them dinners, and I would say, oh, I'm going to cook you dinner tonight. And then I'd only do it because then I'd put loads of extra stuff in it for them. I'd put an extra knob of butter in, I'd put a load of oil in, I'd put extra cheese on top, and then we'd all sit down. I'd be like, oh, well, I'm not eating it. You can have it though. And she was like, your parents are getting older, and are you happy that you're actually potentially making them more unwell? You're doing things to them, and stuff like that really helped me. And alongside that, my GP also said to me, because I used to have to go in every other day for blood tests and ECGs, and it just became the norm to me that that's what I had to do. But one day I went in and she said, if you don't sort yourself out, it's got too much now, I'm going to have to section you. And when she said those words, for some reason, I don't know why those words hit me in a certain way, but they just did. And I left that doctor's surgery and I never,
Terrified.
I did. And I said to myself, right, I'm going to sort myself out. And the next week, my mum was due to have a hysterectomy, and I knew that she would need me around. And I think the combination of my doctor saying she was going to section me and knowing really, really that however much my mum was constantly annoying me with my eating disorder, I needed to be there for her. This was really a big deal to her. It was really serious. And she'd already had her hysterectomy cancelled a couple of times because her blood pressure was so high. And I know that was because of me and my stress.
Stressed out,
yeah. And so it was all those sort of things that that day I just said, right, I'm going to sort it out. I walked home from the doctors. I called my gym that I used to go to 6 hours every day. And I said, cancel my membership.
Oh my God.
I said, cancel my membership. I'm never coming back.
6 hours a day.
Yeah, I used to go 3 in the morning, 3 in the evening, and it's just bizarre. But yeah, I said
3 in the morning,
like 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the
3
evening.
hours in the
yeah,
morning.
And I said, cancel my membership. I'm never coming back, and I never went back. And whilst
so it was like something came down, a sort of
and I can't
some kind of switch was switched.
Yeah, and I it's crazy because I know that it's never. Well, it's not for everyone. For the majority, sort of almost going cold turkey on something is not the way to do it. I've experienced that with trying to come off medication and trying to go cold turkey, and it's the worst thing you could ever do. But for me, that did kind of help. And whilst I wasn't perfect with how I sort of did everything, like you go up and down, you have a few sort of relapses. Instead of going to the gym, I just walked excessively and just walked for miles and miles and miles. And then the only reason that I actually stopped doing my excessive walking is what is a terrible reason, that the walking route that I used to go on every day, a woman was murdered on that route. And so I just, that terrified me even more. And it's horrendous. And I feel awful saying how sort of almost that sort of thing
Survivor's
saved me.
Guilt almost.
Yeah, it's like that's such a awful thing to think of, but that was the proper end turning point where I was like, right, this is silly now. I'm not going to the gym. I'm not walking anymore, and I just started to sort my life out. And it was from then that I've just been improving, I guess. But I would say it's taken a very long time, and I'm sort of 10 years post, sort of into recovery now. And I feel so much more in control at this point, but it's definitely there's definitely been ups and downs, and you still have those, you still have those thoughts.
Under pressure, I was going to say, under pressure, there must be times that you revert back.
Yeah, because it's just that sense
in some ways, it's an addiction, isn't it?
It is. Like, an addiction is a great way of putting it, because when I watch or listen to podcasts or TV things or interviews with people who have addictions to drugs or stuff, like really high profile people, and I listen to them, and I almost always feel bad saying it, because I feel like what I went through wasn't maybe as bad, but it was just different. But I really relate massively to someone who has had a drug addiction, an alcohol addiction, a gambling addiction. I can see all those, I can feel all those sort of behaviors and thoughts, because it's just like with an eating disorder. It's not about the food. It's not about any of that. It's what's happening in here. And I think all of those things.
It's the thoughts in your mind, the guy on your shoulder, what I call your shitty committee.
I love that.
Yeah. What I am interested in, though, is, having had an eating disorder, your professional life is now all about food. I know it's gluten-free. And so there's a tension there, isn't there?
Yeah, it's a weird one. And I think people often say to me, how can you do both? And I was actually talking to someone, I was at a food festival at the weekend, and another person who does something very similar to me. She was also we formed a bond over the fact that we both have had eating disorders. And I feel like there are more people than you think that work in food that potentially have had struggles with food, and people deal with it in all different ways. But I think the way that I deal with it is that I personally still, and I'm not sure if I ever will, I don't love food. I don't have that passion for food that I see all sort of my peers who work in the same world as I do. Everyone else is super obsessed, loving stuff, going to all nice fancy restaurants, and really just getting enthralled by food. But because what I do is something where I'm helping other people, and I'm seeing that I'm making
that's your passion.
Yeah, it's my passion. Yes, I have to make recipes.
These other people.
Yeah, I write all these cookbooks and stuff, and I make the food, I eat the food, so I guess I enjoy the food, but I kind of just eat to live. And what I do in this industry is just making sure that people don't miss out, they have an enjoyable experience, and they don't have to go through anything difficult. So I've sort of taken it on its head a little bit. And I think if I was just doing what I do as a food sort of, just writing recipe books to write recipe books like most people do, most recipe books are just like books about Italian cooking or about whatever. They're just random topics. If that's what I was doing, I wouldn't do it. But the fact that what I'm doing is genuinely every day, supposedly people, I met a woman at the weekend who, at a food festival, she cried when she met me and said that I changed her life.
Aww.
And I've had that more times than I can count, which is, to me, is crazy, and I never really know what to do or say. But it's true.
It's a lovely thing.
Yeah,
though. It kind of feeds your soul, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah, no, it's.
I mean, my interpretation of it is that you're giving to others what you most needed yourself, and that is a real inspirer for you.
Completely. It's the most important thing, and I think if I wish, in both the sort of sense of when I first was gluten-free, if I'd had some level of support, that would have been amazing. But equally, in everything that I've gone through, I felt at first I didn't have that level of support, and I just want to make sure, and that's why I do talk quite openly about my eating disorder and my BRCA diagnosis and stuff. I want to make sure that people always feel like they're not alone. I never want someone to feel like they are the only person going through something, because that can just make you fall down sort of a hole of thoughts and everything. And it's very easy to feel like that with all these things, because
I imagine that you're saying that that's what you felt, that you felt very alone.
I felt incredibly alone in a lot of different things that I've been through. I've never been one that's had huge sort of friendship groups, so I never had that many people around me that potentially there could be one other person who could relate to me or something. And I just felt like it just doesn't feel right that people have to go through things and not have that support. And to feel alone is a horrible thing when you're in a position where you one day were, like with gluten-free, you were one day able to just eat everything, socialize with all your friends and stuff, and the next day you are told, oh, sorry, you can't eat any of these things again. And it doesn't just affect, like I said, the food that you eat, but it will affect, oh, everyone's going out for a meal here, they've booked a restaurant, oh, sorry, there's nothing on the menu you can eat. Or, oh, if you come around to my house for a dinner party, oh, if you want to eat anything, bring something with you. And I've spent many a time where I've sat at someone's house while everyone else is eating and I've been drinking some water, and I've been to restaurants and done that. And all these sort of scenarios I come across,
sort of humiliating in a way.
Yeah, and it's not, and it's
a loss.
It's sad, and I hear it from so many different people, like people who have been in my position, but I speak to a lot of parents who have children who have been told that they're gluten-free. And I've met a lot of kids at like book tours and stuff. They've come along and they've told me, I've said to them, oh, how is it at school being gluten-free? And they're like, oh, I have to sit separately to all the other kids when I have my lunch. They put me on a separate table. Everyone else has school meals and my mum has to bring me a packed lunch. And all the other kids, they sometimes come up to me and say, oh, why are you eating that? And there's enough feeling different when you're a child. You don't want food to be another thing. And when I hear these things, that's what really motivates me to do what I do.
Upsets you and motivates you.
Yeah, rather than sort of thinking about working within food and thinking about food all the time. I just hear these stories, people telling me these tales, and I'm like, I need to be there to help these people and make sure that even if I can just help one person, then I've done something.
I can hear the force that I mean, it feels to me as you're speaking, it's both. It's a force that inspires and motivates you, and it's also an enormous demand that is kind of weighs on top of you. And if I was your therapist, I'd invite you to be aware of the two and to ensure that the weight of it isn't the thing that kind of gets too heavy for you, so that you have limits and boundaries and ways of supporting yourself. because otherwise, in doing what you want to give other people what they need, you're emptying yourself out. And it's not an eating disorder, but it's another way of giving more than you're receiving.
Yeah, I would say 100% that is something that I probably should think about, because I definitely give so much. And I so often these days, when I meet up with people in the same world as I'm in, they're like, "Oh, how are you?" And they're sort of, "Oh yeah, I'm doing really well," and everything. And my response usually is, "Oh, I'm exhausted. I'm
Knackered.
yeah," and because I'm on that borderline of what the term burnout is used a lot, and I don't really understand if there's a physical thing of it or not, but I feel on that sort of level, and I have done for quite a long time, that I feel like I'm doing too much.
I mean, you're saying it yourself. You're letting up your own flare, your own flag, if you like. That
Yeah.
I felt exhausted for too long, and burnout is a mind-body state where your mind and your body get to a frazzled state where at some point your body takes over and it says stop, and it just you keel over and you can't do it. So early intervention. I mean, I sound like your mum, and I feel quite maternal towards you as I'm speaking. And it's like, listen to yourself. Like, look at what you're doing. Look at the hours that you're working, and look at setting some boundaries and limits and time out for you to play and have a rest and do things that feed you, that you're not always transmitting and giving, so that you have enough coming in to enable you to do enough that's being transmitted out.
Yeah, I think that is really important. And I know that people have said to me that there'll be a point at which, if I don't do that, that I won't be able to give in the way that I really want to give out.
Exactly.
Because you have to look, I guess, like people always say, you have to look after yourself, number one, so that you can look after other people. But it's so easy. It's, as I'm sure you know, it's easier said than done, because you just get yourself in a bit of a pickle. Yeah, and I'm just like, I've got so much to do. I can't.
And being needed is seductive.
Yeah, it's hard.
No, I mean, I get it. I do get it. But also, Mark and your parents and your family, they'll all get less of you than they want, probably.
Oh, they would love to speak to you, and my parents would love to just, they often message me like, "Where are you? We haven't seen you in ages." And I always have to respond back to them like, "Well, you know, I'm working, I've got so much to do and stuff," and almost put it back on them and said like they shouldn't be asking me too much, because obviously I'm working, I'm trying to make a living, I'm trying to help people, but I know that I don't see them enough. They live 20 minutes down the road, and I haven't seen them that much this year. And it's like, there should be a better balance. Yeah, I'm working on it.
I think a bit like leaving the GP surgery and seeing the psychotherapist. It's letting yourself really know the danger and opening enough, because you're very aware and you have a lot of insight. And it's almost like you're pulled and pushed, and there's a part of you that knows it, and there's a part of you that doesn't want to know it.
Yeah.
And I guess the same mechanism that worked before of the eating disorder, some level of denial, could also be fueling your inability to shift and rebalance a bit.
I think so. I think in a way, my issue is that with like my eating disorder, it's almost like I felt like I couldn't accept it and start the whole process of getting better until I hit rock bottom. And I'm always like, oh, I'm never going to be able to sort things out until I do. But I never want to get to that stage, because I know how horrendous it was. And eating disorder, whilst I often say now I don't have any regrets, because it's helped me so much in so many different ways. I have regrets for what it. I hate what it did to my family, but personally for me, it's taught me a huge amount, and I feel like I'm better equipped than a lot of just people who've never been through it, in terms of looking at food and not feeling negatives about it. But yeah, it's hard.
It's really hard. Can we go to the BRCA gene and your mastectomy as a massive challenge? And I mean, I'm so curious.
So the way that I found out about it was my cousin had breast cancer a couple of times in her 30s. So as a result of that, they tested her for the BRCA gene, because they don't just test people willy-nilly for it. And it came about that she had it, and that's my dad's side of the family, and they're all South African. So I don't know if there's some sort of link that goes with Dutch, and I don't know. They're South African. So she found out she had it, and as a result of that, then her brother and my aunt and uncle were tested, and it was my aunt, who's my dad's sister, she had it. So my dad got tested, he had it, and then only at that point was I able to get tested, because they will only test if like a mum or a dad.
Direct.
Yeah, literally direct. So my dad got tested, then I got tested, and it was a very good process in a way, because prior to me even being allowed to be tested, I had to go for like genetic counselling to check that I understood what would be, if I did have the BRCA2 gene mutation, what that would mean for me and how that would make me feel, because some people just don't ever want to know these things, and that's fine. I really did feel it was important to know, so I got tested, found out that I had it, and then it was just like this sort of long process of speaking to a lot of different people. I was informed that my chance, because everyone's is slightly different, but by me having it, I had an 88% chance of getting breast cancer in my lifetime, about a 40% of getting ovarian cancer, and then some other cancers you have slight increased risk, like skin cancer. And they said to me that the most important one at my age, which I'm 33 now, I was 30 at the time when I found out, was that I need to sort out the breast cancer issue. So there was multiple options. I could do nothing. I could have MRIs
and just be tested all the time.
Yeah, have MRIs annually every year, or I could have a proper double mastectomy and get rid of my boobs. And for me, when I thought about it and thought, well, there's only a 12% chance that's not going to happen, that just seemed far too low to just do nothing. So yeah, when I was 31, I went through with it, and I feel like it was important. It was a big decision, and it was hard, because it suddenly thrust upon you. I'd never even heard of BRCA, and then the first thing I looked it up, and it was like all I found was Angelina Jolie has the BRCA2 gene as well, and that was the only thing I could see on the internet. It's not a very well known thing at all, and you go from being this person who's sort of 30 years old, who doesn't really too much think about their health in that way,
or their mortality.
Yeah, you don't think about anything like that, to suddenly being told, oh, this is going to have to happen. So yeah, age 31, I had my double mastectomy, and that was it was obviously one of the best things that I've ever done. But equally, it was during a period of where COVID was happening, so I had to go in on my own.
Gosh.
They wanted to. They got rid of me out the hospital on the same day, and it was awful, the experience of that. But obviously now I'm super grateful I had it done. It's just a lot to sort of take in, and the BRCA sort of journey isn't just about that. There's more that I have to sort of go through longer term as well.
Because I mean, maybe this is too personal a question, but I don't know whether you want to have children, and whether you could have had the mastectomy after you had children, and then you have this 40% risk of ovarian cancer and your ovaries, and
it's just a lot of things that
complicated.
Yeah, and I almost felt like, how is this fair? How is this fair that I've had to go through this? But yeah, we would really like to have children. And my ovaries, they've said you need to have your ovaries removed by the time you're 40. So obviously it sort of then sets this time bomb. Obviously I don't have my breasts anymore, but we can still have kids. But there's this whole thing that it's a 50-50 chance whether my kids would have the BRCA gene as a result of that. So it's like either just ignore that and just have kids naturally, or which I personally, it's personal to everyone, but that's not something I wouldn't really want that to happen. I don't think my parents would have done that had they known. So for me, we're going to have to have kids. We're going to have to go through an IVF and have to go through that process where they can then test embryos and check that they don't have the gene and stuff. So it makes the process a lot longer and a lot more sort of scary. And like the thought of it is just, I don't know, that people are saying to me that you need to really start thinking about it. And it's like, well, I want to, but I don't feel ready. And it just feels like a lot all of a sudden that I'm just having to deal with when I don't feel in maybe the position. Like, I'm still very career focused. I can't imagine just that happening. And equally, it just feels like having to go through that isn't the way that I ever thought it would be.
No, it sounds really tough and so complex. And I imagine is partly what hooks you into work, because at least at work, what you're doing, where you're going, how to do it, it's very hard and requires a lot of time and energy, but you have a lot of agency. And this dilemma of knowing you want a child, but coming to terms with not having it naturally, you're having to go through IVF, which is in itself complicated, and having the tests for the BRCA gene is complicated. So I can imagine there's a big part of you that just wants to turn away and somehow hope the decision will make itself.
And equally with that as well, like, I think one of the biggest things that I've struggled with in terms of the BRCA stuff is that I've obviously in my life, as we all have, I've known people close to me who have died from cancer. I've known people who have survived cancer, but obviously they went through it, and going through it is just horrendous in itself, even if you've got out the other side. And I almost feel, I get a lot of people say to me sometimes, oh, you're so lucky. You're so lucky that you found out before you were given the opportunity to find out that you might get cancer, so you can do stuff about it. And it kind of almost brings me to feel guilty to even sort of, I feel guilty ever feeling negative about having this gene, because people sort of, obviously some people find out that they have the gene when they're about to die, or people don't have the gene but they've got cancer and then they die from it.
I can see you tying yourself in a knot. And the thing I want to offer to you is two things can be true. It's true that in some ways, from a life-saving perspective, it's good that you had the information that you had BRCA, so that 88% chance has now been removed. It can also be true that it's really shit that you found out you had the BRCA gene, that makes your whole having a child, your relationship with your mortality, your relationship with your health, feels really tough. And both those things sit side by side.
I know that I should think about it and think that there's lots of the vast majority of the population. Like, firstly, you don't need to compare yourself to anyone anyway. But equally, there's many people who haven't had cancer, don't have the BRCA gene, and don't have any of those things. And so my position isn't as good as those people's, I guess. And my position,
exactly,
and I should be.
It's tough.
And I guess everyone, whatever you're going through, you're allowed to feel a certain way about it.
What you feel.
Yeah, exactly. But it's still definitely one of these things that I'm just like, I can be talking to someone who literally has cancer right now, and and sometimes they'll say to me, well, you've been through so much as well, and they're really sort of thinking about me, and I just feel so guilty when I know that they're going through so much more. And I'm just like, I am very lucky that I've been able to have this sort of thing happen to me, and I've got like about a 2% chance of getting breast cancer now, which is amazing. But I guess that still doesn't mean that I can't feel things, but it's sometimes hard to,
exactly,
yeah,
knowing the legitimacy of what you feel and letting yourself express and be the legitimacy of what you feel is tough. I'm very curious, if I was your therapist, to look at guilt. I mean, if I was working with you, a word that has come up a lot through our conversation that I'm very curious as to know its sort of source and kind of interrogate it, I guess, a bit with you, would be guilt. That seems to come up quite a lot.
Yeah, I do feel guilty about a lot of things, and I feel guilty with what my eating disorder put on other people. I feel guilty about feeling anything negative. I feel like my life is good on the most part, and I feel whenever I feel anything that is slightly negative, I feel wrong to ever feel like that, because I'm like, no, you should be positive and you should be grateful. But I am grateful. But I guess, yeah, I'm allowed, everyone can be grateful, and also they're not polar opposites, are they? But yeah.
No, not at all.
That's a big sign. I feel like I've learned a lot talking to you today. Like, I feel really like it's good to just talk more than anything, I think, and just to get things out of your head that sometimes you just keep in your head, because like, again, I don't want to generally put that on other people because I feel guilty sometimes about talking about myself. I don't want to do that to others. I prefer to listen to their issues and help them. So I feel like it's been good to just to get it all out there on the plate, and it's helped me.
Well, I'm really touched by your openness, Becky, and I think that openness and the sort of the way you have quite a lot of competing feelings and thoughts, most of us can connect to. So I think the thing that enables your followers to stay engaged with you is your openness and your genuineness. It feels like you've done that with me, and I feel very touched by this conversation, and I'm really glad that it does feel like it's given you insight to just finding your voice and finding your narrative.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Therapeutic.
Yeah, it has been really therapeutic. And I think when you are someone who does sort of strive to help others, sometimes you do just forget to help oneself and just to think about oneself. I know that that's something that I need to sort out, and that will probably make my work-life balance and everything a lot better and more in line with what I see the majority of people doing, like having a weekend and having time to just sit and do stuff and not think that,
Total.
even, yeah, and just even just walking the dog, to me, I'm just like, oh, need to be back soon because I've got to do work. Oh, we can't have long for lunch today because I've got to do work. It's everything that we do that's something. I feel like whenever we are doing something that isn't work, just before we leave the house or something, I'm always like, got to be back soon, got to do work. I'm always, every time we do something nice, that's the thing that I say just before we do it.
There's a limit.
Yeah.
You limit it. That's
Yeah.
so interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like you kind of like, you can't just have the pleasure of it and let it expand. It's like, no. There's this thing beating on my head that we have to come back.
Yeah.
We have to have a quick lunch. We have to have a quick walk. We have to work is the kind of, is the voice on your shoulder.
So, yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of people will recognize that, including myself. So thank you, Becky. That it feels such a really powerful, lovely conversation, and such a pleasure to meet you. Do you want to talk to people about where they can find you? And you have a new gluten-free air fryer recipe book, don't you?
Yeah, so if anyone does want to find me, I am just on all the social media platforms just with my name, which you'll be able to see on this, I'm sure, but it's at Becky Excell. And yeah, I've been busy beavering away writing a gluten-free air fryer book, which I've got a copy of here, actually. There it is.
Yeah, lovely.
Nice and colourful.
It looks beautiful.
Yeah, well, my ultimate thing is always that just because you're gluten-free doesn't mean it has to be all super medical and boring. We can have fun, we can have colour, and all the recipes super easy and accessible so that nobody ever has to miss out.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Becky.
Oh, thank you so much. And honestly, it's been an absolute, I feel very honoured to get to speak to you today. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Hello, Sophie and Emily. I'm really delighted to talk about Becky Excell. There was so many interesting topics that we raised. I guess the one that comes to mind most is about her eating disorder, but also how that kind of attitude can be played out in different areas of one's life, even if one no longer actually has an eating disorder.
Yes, I guess that sort of the way of operating. But I think when she was talking about her eating disorder, it also made me think about, I think sometimes we seek an equation. So like my mum criticized my weight, so that's why I have a disordered relationship with food, or I experienced a trauma, so X, Y, and Z. And that definitely can be true. But I think also it can be true is that you don't have to have something really horrendous happen to you to struggle deeply and feel great pain and really suffer with mental health, and that your pain and your challenges are valid even if something terrible didn't happen to you. And I think that if you don't have something really traumatic and yet you're really struggling, there's a sort of sense of like, I shouldn't be depressed because my parents loved me and I have these lovely things in my life and I'm whatever the things are. And I think often on this podcast, we return to the both and, so that you can appreciate the things that you have and be grateful for having loving parents and have not experienced a trauma, and really be in the grip of a mental health struggle, really be in pain, really be struggling, so that you kind of can validate both experiences in yourself. And actually, that's probably the best way that you're going to be able to be compassionate to yourself, to be able to seek help for whatever is going on for you.
Yes, and as you were both sort of talking about addiction and relating it to eating disorders, I think often with the clients I've worked with, I worked in an eating disorder clinic for a while and just in private practice, is that often it starts with something like a health kick or like trying to assert control over your life when things feel hard. And what's difficult with eating disorders and addiction is that they do then take a life of their own once, and then they can spiral. Even so, they kind of, why that happens for some people and not others is a mystery. We've got research about epigenetics, about addictive personalities, about patterns of self-worth and self-love. That often I think there's a sense of there's something wrong with me. There's something not lovable.
I'm not enough. Yeah.
And I would say about the point that you were making at the beginning, Mum, about, it doesn't just have to show up in food, is that often I think the way we relate to things shows up in all the aspects of our life. So that, for example, sometimes when I've worked with people who have kind of anorexia type behaviours, the fact that the limiting of pleasure and of care and of love echoes through all the aspects of their life, not just in how they relate to food, in how they might relate to relationships and sex. Are they allowing themselves to be loved, cared for? Are they allowed their body to be touched? Are they, that their kind of level of sort of more punitive relating, the food bit stands out because of the risk factors that come with it and the visibility of someone who is gaining a lot of weight or losing a lot of weight or yo-yoing. But actually, I would say it's a relationship to self often situation where, although you may overcome the behaviors of disordered eating, you can still keep relating to yourself as someone who is not worthy of love and care. And it's a huge achievement to overcome those behaviors, but it's another level of journeying to get to a place of truly thinking yourself you're good enough to be loved and cared for.
So we heard what happened with Becky, how, she went to a treatment centre, which actually just gave her more ways of hiding and damaging herself. But actually it was the tough therapist who really kind of challenged her with the reality of the impact of what she was doing. But as you were both saying, it's very kind of unique. Is there an understanding that either or both of you have about addictive behaviours that is useful, that helps us kind of unhook them from ourselves? You're on mute.
I think that there is a sort of gold standard of eating disorder treatment. I work with adolescents and children, and that is sort of gold standard of eating disorder treatment for young people, if the Maudsley method, which is a family-based treatment model. But I think also what Becky showed is that really, it's really individual. And what works for you is going to be individual. That what worked for her was this sort of tough love approach of actually focusing less on her and her experience and more on what impact this is happening on the people that you love. For lots of people, that might not work because
that would make them feel worse.
Make you feel guilty, and actually you're not doing this intentionally. Most people aren't wanting to hurt anybody when they're suffering. And so then it can just sort of make you actually compound the problem by kind of making you like, okay, now I'm going to hide more or whatever. So I think it sort of goes back to quite a lot of research around sort of success of therapy being much more about the relationship with your therapist than a particular model.
Yes, and I think one of the really hard things, if you're someone who is family or friend of someone who's either someone so deep in an eating disorder or an addiction, is often it's just when they're ready. And when they're ready isn't when you're going to want them to be ready.
Because you want it now.
Exactly. And exactly the same thing that didn't work at all 6 months ago. A year later, it might be exactly the thing because it often, not always, but often needs to point in someone where they go, I don't really want to do this anymore, or this is too much. I want something to change. And for some people, it's an incremental thing of like, okay, I'll try it. I don't really want to, but I'm doing it for my mum or my brother or whatever.
The stats are that eating disorders have risen by 400%. And maybe we shouldn't just stick to eating disorders, but expand it out to behaviours. But eating disorders have risen by 400%, particularly in young girls, in the last sort of during the pandemic and post-pandemic. And I'm not sure any of us fully understand what that's about.
I think it's the rise of eating disorders in young girls is part of a mental health crisis. So eating disorders parallel a lot of like the rise in anxiety, the rise in self-harm, So I suppose I think it sort of comes under the umbrella of the explosion in real struggles with mental health, particularly young people. So I would sort of contextualize it in that way. And I think that people have a lot of guesses were causing that. And it's a mixture, I think, of pandemic, social media, increased recognition of mental health, sort of permission
literacy,
to talk about it and be honest and be vulnerable. And so I think it's a sort of a combination of all of like a mixture of challenges, but also positives of like that people are more able to say like, I'm struggling, I'm not doing okay. I did also sort of want to talk about my own experience of having an eating disorder. And it's one that I have mentioned here before, but I feel like I wrestle with talking about it. I think not really of shame, but because I see clients and they might hear this and that feels quite strange and not totally comfortable. But I had an eating disorder when it's very similar. I really resonated with Becky because my eating disorder started when I was about 19, similarly to her. After I went to university, it feels important to talk about this, I suppose, as a human and resonating with what I think is a very difficult transition for lots of people, which is going to university or moving out of home. And I think you're sort of thinking, oh, I should be having a wonderful time. Also, there's this sort of sense of like, oh, suddenly I'm supposed to be an adult. And you might feel really not like an adult. You might really still feel like a child. And there's an idea or a wish that your parents could come or whoever looks after you could come and fix it and make it better and make me better. But I also think there's a sort of a loss of this kind of recognition that everybody goes through going into adulthood of actually I can't go back and change the thing that happened when I was a child that maybe I wish that I could change. Like I'm not a child anymore, I'm an adult. And I think all of those things can contribute to real difficulties, and particularly in eating disorders, because I think there's this sort of sense of shrinking, like I'm going to make myself into a child, not consciously, but sort of I'm going to make myself needing of care, of needing looking after,
sort of helplessness,
of helplessness, but alongside that, real sort of control and power and all those really complicated, difficult things that come with eating disorders. I didn't answer your question at all, but
well, I think I'm really glad that you have been so open and honest. And I heard a lot about you and us when I was listening to her, when I was with her, and how painful it is, and also how complicated it is when it's the very thing that you're wrestling with about being an adult. Also, as a parent, I wrestled with, should I treat you as a child, or is that over-parenting and over-interfering and infantilizing you? And I never knew where to step in and where not to, how the line kind of went. And it was incredibly complicated and very complicated for our relationship, and extremely painful seeing you suffer, being with you as you suffered. And it was a family system pain too. I don't know whether that's useful for people to hear.
I think maybe what's useful is that sometimes knowing that sometimes things don't last forever.
Yes.
Like that we are in a really different place now. And we were really lucky in lots of ways as a family, and not everybody is as lucky. But I think it's helpful, like even when you're at your darkest moment, to know that most things don't last forever.
Yeah.
And Becky was a beautiful example of how things can change. And it doesn't mean that all the struggle go away, but that she has a full life that she's able to enjoy. And so are lots of other people who struggle in really, really dark places.
Yeah.
It's like mum's dilemma and the dilemma that happened for us as a family of like, oh, what are we supposed to do in this moment? For when you're working with parents with adolescents, but also, we probably all have our own, each family member of us is going to have a different version of what that journey as a family was like. I know that for me, I felt like our family became much more whole in a way after going through that than before. that there were things that sort of were surfaced as a family that needed to be met, and that if families could possibly hold on to some sense of, although this is often terrifying and really scary and dangerous, there is also something to be understood here, that as a family system, it's probably really important for the whole family to be well and to have good relationships, because like in the Maudsley model, as a family intervention, there's so much about the system that is involved. It's not just that one person who is struggling. It's not just about them.
And just to add in to what you're saying, Sophie, and I want to hear your response, is that there's a psychological kind of take, which is that one member of the family is expressing for the whole family the dark side of the family that isn't being named, isn't being dealt with, and that they can become like the black sheep, if you like, but they're also the cure, in that they, like Sophie described, they forced us. We had family therapy, which was extremely tough, but also vital, really vital. And I feel enormously grateful for it and quite tearful remembering it, in a kind of good way, in that dealing with the things that we hadn't voiced, that we hadn't talked about, helped bring us all together. And I kind of wish it wasn't Emily's suffering that did that.
Yeah, I mean, was it fun? No. But was it anyway? In terms of like for parents, I think there's not a neat answer, because it depends on the age of your child. Like if you've got a 19-year-old, there actually is a real limit to what you can do, unless there's a point where they can be sectioned, which is really extreme. Then all you can do is, I think, being honest is helpful, and see, like, I think part of the problem is that we don't want to think that our child is suffering as much as they're suffering, and so we can sort of pretend like, oh, like they're okay really, but kind of being honest with yourself and then being honest with your child. If your child is older and you don't have power, I think if your child is younger, then again, it's difficult to get help. It's really difficult, and that is a huge problem that lots of people face, because often it's like this insane system that basically you have to sort of be in your most crisis of crisis, and then suddenly you're run to the top of the list because your child has been hospitalized, and suddenly you're getting all these interventions. But by that point, like with all things, early intervention is much more effective and much better. So it's difficult to answer, because people aren't necessarily able to access the help that would be the most helpful. The Maudsley model is the most effective, like from an evidence-based perspective, and it's a very behavioral. It's a family-based model, and it sort of, from an evidence point of view, the most effective. But again, for lots of people, sort of focus purely, very thinking about food and your attitudes to food, and they sort of, and that doesn't work for everybody. So I'm not really answered the question either.
It's because they're really difficult questions.
It's complicated. And it's individual. And
in the show notes, we can add links to BEAT, to the Wessex disorder. It's a very Sweden. Southwest, I can't remember what it's called, Southwest Eating Disorder
Yes,
Association.
there's lots of good online resources and communities of family experiencing the same thing that I think makes a big difference.
And the Maudsley model.
Yeah, and the Maudsley model. There's a couple of really good books, actually, that I recommend to parents around. A lot of it is around separating the eating disorder from the person that you love. So those are not the same thing.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful place to end. Thank you both so much, and particularly thank you to Becky for being so incredibly open and honest. And it felt like a very therapeutic session. I think for both of us it felt very kind of true. For those of you listening, thank you for listening, and I hope it is useful. It'd be great if you could share it with somebody, one other person who you think it might help, and also rate and review the podcast so that it can be found by others. And again, thank you for listening to us.